Ordinary Heroes is a monthly radio show based out of Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio, and I'm your host, Marcy Bain. Ordinary Heroes is a show where we touch upon the grand ideas, religious traditions, rituals, beliefs, and philosophies that inscribe our lives with meaning. Everybody has a story to tell, and everybody is an ordinary hero. Today's program features Grammy-nominated, multiple Dove Award-winning musician Jennifer Knapp, whose musical career has spanned the Christian music world and the secular indie folk rock world. Jennifer is a woman as charming, vivacious, and funny offstage as she is on stage. In our fascinating chat, Jennifer shares her thoughts on the music she listened to in college, her feelings about Justin Bieber. She teaches us all how to speak Australian, and we chat about LGBT issues and faith. So cozy up to your radio for the next hour or so and make yourself a fly on the wall for this fun conversation with Jennifer Knapp.
Ironically enough, in the early 90s, as a college student, I really relied heavily on college radio because that was before the internet. That was before, Spotify and Pandora radio. So you really kind of had to, especially for me being in a small Midwestern kind of enclave of Pittsburgh State University in Pittsburgh, Kansas, you really had to work hard to find your music that was off the beaten path.
Yeah, you actually had to go searching for it. You couldn't just press a button on the internet and poof, it appears.
I know, it's amazing. And now there's so much, I'm dizzy. So it's kind of a crazy shift in a small amount of time.
Yeah, well, I mean, now someone can just sit in their own garage and record a song and pop it up on the internet, and
I'm doing it right now.
There you go. There you go.
Or even on my iPhone, I have got hundreds and hundreds of minutes now on my iPhone. It's just instead of the days where I used to walk around with a mini disc or worry about it, you can plug an iRig into your iPad or use your some kind of phone or any kind of app and record wherever you are, and that makes it amazing. And even folks coming out to shows and recording the whole show with their own phones. So it's just I can't even it really is hard sometimes when you sit back and think about how quickly things would change.
Oh my gosh. And there's something about college music I think that's just so formative for all of us too. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how the music you listen to in college has kind of shaped the artist that you've become.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you don't really, it's one of those things where you don't really know it at the time that it's shaping you, I remember really enjoying a group called the Cowboy Junkies, and I had every one of their records, and whenever I would sit down to listen to Cowboy Junkies, I would listen chronologically until they were all done, and then I'd go back again. And I think I look at that experience, and I remember the way that Michael Timmons used to write very easy kind of folk style with 1, 4, 5 chords. So not a lot of complicated kind of guitar parts and very simple rhythms, and yet these very haunting melodies that gives such a room and space for that. And they were really easy songs for me to learn, and I was just starting to play guitar, and I would love Sweet Jane from the Cowboy Junkie. So there I'd try to learn it. I think it's 2 chords from memory, it's in with a A and D or something. So it made me feel like I could do something. It made me feel like I could be a rock star when I could play a song that I enjoyed singing, and I think that really changed. And then Tracy Chapman was at that point, as a songwriter, I think her poetry really meant a lot to me.
Oh my gosh,
she really did an amazing job for the first time in my life of. I grew up in Kansas, and I grew up kind of a slave to what my parents made me listen to. And they listened to mainstream country music. That was the only thing you can find on the radio station, which there were things about it that I really loved. But as a junior high kid, I would, all my friends are listening to Whitesnake and Bon Jovi, and I'm a nerd because I'm singing the Judds. So I really I found that when Tracy Chapman came out, it was the sense of the storytelling about country music and the acoustic music that I knew and resonated somehow in my heart and my spirit. Yet she drew this amazing folk picture of an urban world that I didn't even understand yet. I knew the plight, the way that she kind of related that. And I think as a songwriter and a lyricist, I look back on episodes like that and go, wow, that really has shaped what I do. That I do push I'm not afraid to push the country influences that I've grown up with, yet at the same time to kind of try and relate in however I can as a songwriter, the experiences I've gone through. And I think seeing that happen gives me the courage to kind of do that now, even today.
That's really cool. How would you say, from college to now, how would you say that you've evolved as a songwriter? Are there things that you did when you were first starting out in music that you kind of look at now and go, oh, that was a novice thing or that was a sophomore thing? Or, I mean,
Yeah, it's I don't know. In some ways, I go back and I listen to some of my older stuff, and it does seem kind of youthful and young and elementary. Like anything that like any drawing that you would do in first grade versus sixth grade. I think control is one of the first words that comes to my mind. I definitely feel like I have more of an idea about the control that I want to impart to my art. At the same time, I think the further on I get down the track, I still feel a sense of, oh my gosh, I have no idea what control is. Like, I still don't feel like I'm a master at my craft or my art, but I'm inspired to continue to kind of strive to find my voice and what I do well. And I think I stopped comparing myself to what I was when I was young. I wanted to be somebody, I wanted to be like, I wanted to play that song exactly the way Tracy Chait played it. And then if I couldn't play it, then I think something was wrong with me. And then, or 10,000 Maniacs or something like that, where you just kind of, as a young person, I think, try to put on everybody else's things and see where you fit. And I think as I've grown older, even though I feel like, I do kind of have a direction that control, if I would call it that, is a confidence in what I can do now. Knowing what I do, kind of inspiring myself to do it, but still knowing that when I sit down to write, I'm going to write a song and I'm going to look for an experience and I'm not going to worry about where I measure up. And maybe that's part of the adulthood going through it, or even maybe what, having, I don't want to call it success, but having the confidence, having experience, and being able to, in some sense, have your art appreciated gives you the confidence to kind of move forward, that you know that when you write the song that you can play it for someone and it will make a difference somewhere.
yeah, I think this is actually kind of a good segue. I kind of want to talk now, and I want to catch people up to speed a little bit about your backstory of where you've been and where you're at today. So you started out kind of in your college years making music, and you spent some time in the recording world of the Christian music world performing, and then you took a bit of a break for 7 years.
I call it a midlife retirement.
Yeah, a quarter
I
life.
highly recommend it.
Yeah, a quarter life retirement, and then you came back in 2010, and in a kind of very public way, you came out as Australian, and people went
There
bananas.
was a press release, so yeah, it's pretty public.
people went bananas about your Australian heritage. No, I'm kidding. You came out as a lesbian, and all of a sudden, it's like all these conversations that you were having about music changed. And so where before you're having all these kind of conversations in the Christian music world, in the Christian realm, now people are bringing in kind of sexuality and sexual orientation to your music. So what, I mean, now that you've had like 2 years or so to kind of process that and step back from that. So what was that like? I mean, was that just like, overwhelming on the public level?
I mean, you've done a really good job of trying to summarize about 15 years worth of living. It's funny because when I look back on it, like, how in the world did I get into Christian music? And that in and of itself is, chapters upon chapters of a book. And but it was a very genuine experience where I never actually meant to be a public person at all. I mean, the strange thing is I got involved with writing music about my faith and my faith experience when I was in college, just at a time where I think there were a lot of kids, in particular in religious environments, there was a lot more push in the 90s to start allowing young people to kind of express themselves through their faith experiences. There were a lot of youth groups, there were a lot of youth programs going on, and where churches had largely kind of seemed like for a long time a place where old people kind of gathered and passed the plate to, get the potluck dinner moving. There were a lot of young people kind of interacting in those environments, and I think we brought our music with us. And even a lot of my friends that are now still doing faith-based music today, we were there at a time where we were asked what we thought and what we were experiencing. I think, and so when I started to play and write music about my faith, that's what it was. I had no idea that there was this industry that kind of existed that, would pay my bills, or that people would view my expression of my faith and my experience as a ministry either. But I did that for several years, and then kind of got to this crossroads of not knowing, was I did I do and perform music because I really performed that I had any stake in the creative process, or was I just there because I was trying to propagate a particular brand of religiosity? And not that one was bad. I greatly admired many of my friends who felt like their whole purpose in being was to minister to people and to serve people in their faith communities. Yet I really was at a crossroads because I didn't really view the way that I approached my participation in that community that way. I was all experiential, very much from a songwriter point of view. Wow, this is the experience that I've had, or this is, I'm relating the story of an experience that somebody else has had. And so when I came to that crossroads, I just kind of I didn't implode in like a self-destructive kind of, hey, I went on a heroin binge kind of way, but I just didn't know what I wanted to do anymore. So I just kind of dropped it all. And at about that same time too, I was meeting, I met my partner and I'm starting to go, oh my gosh, yeah, I think I might like girls. And which is really odd to be in your late 20s and to have to come out of 10 years of like professionally induced celibacy for 10 years, just going, what do I do? And so I think that just kind of hit to a head, and I just needed to go to a quiet place. And what I definitely thought that I was quitting everything and kind of walking away, but it turned out to be quite the wilderness experience. I ended up living in Australia for several years and got to a point where I just really realized that I missed my art. But that took a long time. I'm definitely paraphrasing that, but it took me a long time to realize that music was so much a part of the way that I approached the world and how I expressed that. And I think to get to the head of where my sexual orientation became an issue, not for me as an individual, but for a public, was that I realized that because of my history inside of a relatively conservative viewpoint with working in Christian music, that when I came back, that people might ask me where I'd been. I was moving with my partner, that we'd been together for several years. And, it was one of those things where I knew people were going to ask. It had been all over the internet, whether I was or wasn't. And so I knew that when I felt like I had a decision to make. If I was going to do music again and do it for a living and do it publicly and start to share that, and maybe it's partly because I'm a songwriter too, and it is so personal, the kind of music that I have, but I knew people were going to ask. And they knew they were going to ask me that personal question. So, and I knew that I would tell the truth. So it was one of these things where I debated. It seemed like a long time. I don't think it was really actually that long. In terms of when I said, hey, I want to play music, and am I going to let my sexual orientation be something that scares me away from doing what I want to do? It felt really long, but I think in terms of the realization, that process was relatively quick, like less than 6 months. I just said, oh my gosh, I do music. This is what I want to do, and I'm not going to let that get in my way, and we'll deal with it when we get there. So yeah, when I definitely came back to Nashville and people were really excited that I was doing music again, everyone assumed that I would be doing faith-based music, which incidentally I'm actually not. But there's excitement about that, and I said, no, I'm not actually doing faith-based music anymore, although it does show up obviously in what I'm doing. And then they go, oh, well, we don't care. We want to put you on our shelves anyway. And by the way, I'm,
By the way,
I'm also in a same-sex relationship. And they're like, oh, and it's just crickets. So, and I think, there are some ways that the religious community respond. I think in the way that we typically think that the religious community will respond, with anger and rejection and kind of that Bible bashing kind of thing. But I think the backstory or the news story that I've been experiencing the last 2 years is how radically different and positively and affirming that experience has been as well.
Yeah, and I kind of want to talk about that for a minute, because I know that you were probably bracing yourself for, albums being pulled off shelves.
Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah. For, negative emails and things like that. But what's been underreported is that some people had a totally different reaction. Like my friend, oh gosh, I think she saw your Larry King interview, and then like the day your album came out, she downloaded your album, and then she bought an emergency copy just in principle. And then she wasn't real familiar with your music before. She bought your whole back catalog. So,
wow.
Like some people had that reaction. So,
it's the new thing though. Like, it's funny because I've been exposed to a whole new world, and that's kind of been the idea. I'm basically a new general market artist, and knew that I would be. And what's funny is that I find myself in these two worlds between the Christian fans that I've had for a long time, which build up a bulk of the instant familiarity with what I've done and know the history of what I've done and are just following with me. And then these new folks that come along because they've heard the latest record, they've seen something in the public eye, like because of the Larry King stuff. And then they're at a place where they look at my back catalog horrified because they're like, what is all this Jesus stuff? Like, what do I do with this? So, I'm like equally offensive to so many people across the board. And it's really taught me to kind of not only have a thick skin, but like to really listen to what people are going through. And it's really funny. Like I can write a song and think that I know what it's about. And somebody will come up and tell me some experience that they've had with it. And it's really taught me to kind of widen, not to widen my appreciation for people and what they go through and how much art is a much of expression of where we go through. And it goes back to what you were saying in that, our formative years of college, we have these moments in time where some piece of art, whether it's a movie or a television show or, some bit of pop culture or music that becomes the backdrop without us even realizing that it helped us get through this time, or it was literally the soundtrack to the life that we had and the experience that we had in the time. So I find it absolutely shocking that someone would use my stuff in that regard, but sure enough, and it's been kind of amazing to see, like, my own history has a timeline through all of it as well.
Oh yeah, and people cover you all over the place.
It's
on
weird
YouTube.
to go. I had a job. I was working in Australia in Sydney, and at this antique store. And one day I come into work, and everybody's sitting around the desk, like giggling. I'm like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, we're watching YouTube, and they're just giggling. And I walk around in the back, and they're YouTubing me. And they had no idea what I did for a living before this, right? I was just Jen. I just come into work and move furniture around and, dust off teacups. And here one day they finally figure it out, and they were like dying, like pulling up old things of me on YouTube. And they're like, we can Google you. You're on YouTube. And then other people are like, look, and this person's singing you. People sing your stuff. I was like, and it was just such a weird reality thing because I'm like, what? Who does that? Like, I'm just a normal human being. I'm like, I get up every day. Occasionally I do laundry. Very occasionally. I just do normal things. And then stuff like that lives on its own on the internet. It's a very bizarre feeling.
Well, our crack team here at the radio station, we did YouTube you. And I have to bring something up because I found a very curious YouTube video of a young lad named Justin Bieber who covered the song Refine Me.
He did.
Yeah.
Too bad I didn't write that song, though. The only song that I didn't write, and Justin Bieber covers it, and it ends up in his movie. I'm like sick to death right now. I'd really love that Justin Bieber royalty money to be coming in.
Yeah. Well, have you actually seen the Bieber movie?
No, I haven't seen the Bieber movie, but I have seen, I think, the clip. Is he sitting on like a movie theater steps or something? Really bad recording.
Yeah.
Like just like an iPhone recording at night on the street or something. But yeah.
Yeah.
I think I saw somewhere like long before Bieber hit, somebody had sent me a YouTube clip of this young kid playing. I think he does a cover on YouTube. He's sitting on a sofa or something, and I was like, "Wow, that's really bad." and I would say that to Justin if I ever meet him. But no, yeah, it was just one of those weird things. Like, why would people sit down and record themselves and put one of my songs and go put up on YouTube? But I mean, it's a whole. Is there a name for that? Like the YouTube cover. You know what I mean?
There should be an industry.
Like, I mean, everybody does it. Like people cover Lady Gaga, like just a laptop and singing it a cappella, and then they put it up on YouTube. Like, I keep thinking, like, if I were gonna do that, if I were gonna like sit down my laptop and put something up on YouTube, who would I sing? And I don't know who I would.
The thing is, you tweet it at that celebrity too now.
Really?
Yeah.
Like you cover it and you literally tweet it.
Yeah, like Lady Gaga, they're like little kids now that will sing her stuff, and then they tweet it to her and hope that she'll tweet back.
Really?
Yeah.
Maybe I should do a Justin Bieber cover and then tweet it to Justin Bieber and
I
see
would
what
be
he does.
so happy if you did that.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, the Justin Bieber movie, for anyone who hasn't seen it, it's a story of a young lad who covers a Jennifer Knapp song and then becomes extremely famous. That's a true story.
Yeah, I'm sure that's totally what it's about.
Made up. That's what the whole thing is about.
suppose here in a little bit I should actually play something on a record you can buy off of iTunes. But yeah, hopefully in 2013, earlier than later, I'll get something new out because it's burning a hole in my pocket at the moment.
Yeah, and I have a question about the new album. So I follow your Twitter, and a
Yes.
couple of weeks ago, I saw a very curious picture of a mad nun. And
A mad nun, yes.
Yeah, I want you to talk about that because you wouldn't know this, but I actually have kind of a little thing for nuns.
Is that like on the up and up? Like, what do you mean by a little thing for nuns?
I mean,
like,
I'm not saying it's a winning strategy. I have like a little straight girl crush on nuns. And I don't know
okay,
if it's the outfit,
that's
but
deep-seated kind of psychological grounds
Yeah.
there.
I have a little fear of nuns, but I grew up
Most
Catholic.
people do. They're like clowns and nuns. No, this is a friend of mine has she's a wind-up nun. Yeah, and when she walks, you wind her up and she walks and she spits sparks out of her mouth. So when you get, that's why I call her the mad nun. So whenever I get upset, I go over there and wind up the nun, and the nun just kind of waddles along like a penguin and shoots sparks out of her mouth.
So does the nun have like a place on the album? Like, are we
Well,
going to hear background vocals from the
I
nun?
wanted to call the work that Margaret Becker and I were doing like a mad nun production because she has a great Catholic history, but she was like, no, I don't think so. I don't think that's going to happen. So me with my Protestant history, that was like not going off well.
So there's the nun, the story of the nun. I enjoy your Twitter. For anyone who doesn't follow Jennifer Knapp on Twitter, you're missing out, and you absolutely need to follow her on Twitter. Where else can we find you? You're like all over the internet.
It's the usual. I mean, I guess the landing point is if you go by jenniferknapp.com, then you get attached to the Facebook, you get attached to Twitter, and I guess there are a couple. I try to blog. I'm dreadful. I talk to my mother actually better than I blog. So, but when I do blog, they're really great.
They are fabulous. I've read them all. All right, so
5 of them.
all 5. I've reread a couple of them. So there you go. One of the things that's kind of been underreported since you've come back to music is like Jennifer Knapp, The Lost Years in Australia.
Oh, yeah?
And I figure one of these days you're going to do a show in Australia, and your American fans they're diehard, so they're going to want to come, but they're not going to know what Tim Tams and Vegemite are, and they're not going to know how to speak Australian, and I think that could be potentially a disaster. So we're going to do a little segment here called How to Speak Australian.
Do you have
Jennifer
a
Knapp.
primer or
I
something?
might. Yeah.
All right. Am I supposed to translate for you?
Yes. So I'm going to give you words, and you're going to give me the Australian
Oh, yeah, right,
equivalent
mate. All right, let's see if I can do it
of
now.
these words. Are you ready?
Okay.
This is like a high-pressure situation,
All right.
but not really. All right. So barbecue. The Australian word for that would be...
We would grill.
Yeah, you would grill.
Yeah, you'd call it barbecue, but it's not barbecue the way that you would say in the South or where I'm from. Like we're gonna like barbecue hot dogs when I grew up in Kansas, but if you're in Australia, you're gonna barbecue something. Isn't it the grill? I'm looking at my resident Aussie over here. Yeah, I don't know.
She's opted
I
out.
think I feel like I'm failing on that one, but yeah, if we throw something on the barbecue, that means we're grilling it. We're putting it over fire and setting it on fire outside barbecue.
Okay. Breakfast.
Brekkie.
There you go. Afternoon.
Oh, you wanted me to say Barbie. That's what you want to
That's
throw
what
it
I
on the
was fishing
Barbie.
for, yeah.
Oh, you're looking for the slang. All right, I got
Yeah.
you. No, you throw it on the Barbie, yeah.
Yeah.
And the Brekkie, yeah, Brekkie.
Afternoon.
Tea.
Fair dinkum. What does that mean?
Fair dinkum is like it's true. It's like no fair dinkum, mate. Like I'm telling you the truth. Like fair dinkum, like honest to goodness. Fair dinkum.
And people say that kind of a lot down there. Yeah.
It depends. Like if one of the things I figured out with Aussies, if that particular phrase is in your vocabulary, it's one that you'll use. But then not everyone has it. So I mean, everyone's familiar with most of the dial, the different kinds of words in little Aussie languages, but not everybody uses it. Because I was so disappointed when I first moved to Australia that nobody said "g'day" to me on a regular basis. It'd be "hello, how are you? How are you going?" is a big one to say. Like when you're just meeting somebody the first time, like "Hey, Marcy, how you going?" And it's one that's been hard for me to break because I had to learn it so much that now most of the time when I meet someone, I'm like, "How you going?" But hardly anyone says "g'day, mate."
Oh,
So
that's just like blown every perception I've ever had
but
of Australia.
but the people who do it, they do it. I mean, that's just what they say is "g'day," and so it's kind of an irony that I really thought that everybody would be, here's some Vegemite, mate, "g'day." So you don't see that many kangaroos either, but you have to kind of head out into the bush to see that.
Okay. Lollies would be another word.
Candies, like
Yes.
but like particular kinds of candies, like like a Werther's or little Sonic snacks, things you suck on or chew on. Lollies.
Sheila.
Sheila's like I would describe it like it's kind of a colloquialism for a chick, a gal, but not. I don't want to say it's not full on trailer trash kind of thing. It's just a gal, like not a lady necessarily, just but your average run of the mill might wear just normal clothing, kind of Sheila.
Walkabout.
Man, okay, I feel like I'm failing the entire Australian culture right now. I'm being shamed. I'm doing my best. Okay, walkabout is kind of. I think the roots of walkabout, if I'm correct, come from like the Aboriginal type of heritage of Australia. But most of the time, walkabout is like this bit of a journey you get, but while you're figuring who you are. So like I would describe when I in my time in Australia, I definitely went walkabout. I took 6 months. I circumnavigated the country in my 4-wheel drive, and I didn't really have a plan. I just was getting out and living life and getting up every day and just kind of figuring out what was next and just kind of, I guess if you were going to put it in Eastern religion kind of way, just kind of, going on your meditative journey and trying to figure out who you are when you get back, kind of get it all together in your brain and in your heart and in your spirit. That's kind of walkabout.
Very cool. And then the last one, are you ready for
All
the
right.
very last one? Ankle biter.
Oh, I'd be like a toddler or a small kid. Yeah.
Very good. I think your fans are totally set now. They're going
Right.
to blend in to the Australian culture.
Oh my gosh.
No
I
one
feel
will know that they're
if there's an
Americans.
Aussie out there listening to this, I apologize because I can just feel like my Aussie friend's eyes burning me in the back of my head right now. I wasn't as smooth. Oh man. Yeah.
Yeah, you did fine.
Right,
You're a
thanks.
rock star.
I still eat bananas. I still park my car in the garage and eat tomatoes anymore. So, and have Vegemite on a regular basis. So please don't kick me out.
What actually is Vegemite?
It's a yeast extract, as if it needed more help with
That
Yankees.
sounds delicious.
I actually really enjoy it. It's better to think the mistake that Americans make is they look at it and they go Nutella, and then they spread it all over their toast, and it's dreadful. It's not meant to be in this big old like American sized glob on your toast. Just a nice little dusting of a little bit of Vegemite and a really great salty butter, and it's like having it's like dipping your toast in a nice piece of savory gravy or something.
I was just going to say it sounds kind of like it's savory.
It's savory, and it's really nice to have, like, say, one piece of toast with a little bit of Vegemite and the other piece of toast with a little bit of honey, and it's like sweet and salty. Oh, it's so excellent.
Do you have pasties in Australia?
Pasties, yeah,
Yeah.
like a little meat packet
Mhm.
of
It's
like
a Hot Pocket.
It is like a hot pocket, only better.
Yeah, they're delicious.
But that's an English kind of thing, I think. And then the Australians have really affected like the meat pie, which is sort of, if you think like American pot pie with the pastry all the way underneath of it with the lid on top. But they're so great because you can get like a steak and bacon or steak and kidney meat pie, or you can get like a chicken curry or oh my gosh, that's the reason why I'm 20 pounds heavier. I could have meat pies every day. Those are beautiful.
So, like an American fan goes to a Jennifer Knapp concert that's going to happen in Australia, which I know it's going to.
They can bring me meat pies. Like in here, I want you to bring me Scott.
Right.
In Australia, you want me to bring me meat pies.
All right, now I kind of want to switch gears, and I want to transition to something very specific that you have been doing for the last couple of years since you've been back, and that's an event that you do called Inside Out Faith,
Sure.
which is a kind of an advocacy event. And so I want to kind of just, for people who are maybe not familiar, what is Inside Out Faith?
Well, Inside Out Faith right now is basically just me engaging faith communities with LGBT issues. So for those who aren't in the framework of knowing the vernacular, what it means is I go to churches and tell them to be nice to gay people. LGBT meaning lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered, and of course all of the other kind of gender and sexual orientation and gender identity kinds of issues is kind of. But in short, it's basically me giving the inside scoop on what it's like to be one of those kinds of folks, me in particular being an L of the LGBT, giving the inside scoop on what it's like to be a person of faith and what that experience has been like. Obviously, most people don't have as public of as an experience that I've had. I don't know very many people that have had like a Reuters press release on announcing their gender preference for partners. But I think I think if there's a commonality to it, it's especially in faith-based environments, it can be a real wall to have to climb over, and in explaining the experience that you're having and being able to have a public space where everybody kind of wants to talk or make a judgment about it, yet it's something that we don't often talk about in our faith communities. And I think we're coming out of a shift of assuming that faith-based communities or churches, or in particular from my brand of faith practice and Christianity, is the assumption that there's something wrong with you or something wrong with your spirituality because of your sexual orientation or your gender identity. And I think there are enough people out there beginning to tell this story that's starting to shed light on the fact that that's different. And, for whatever reason, for the time and place, my story is kind of one of those things that I can tell with an immediate impact that sheds light into that conversation.
Very good. Now, how does a person, if let's say someone, is hearing your story and they're reading a little bit of your press and they're kind of interested in getting more involved, how does a person go about booking an IOF
Yeah,
event?
well, I mean, one of the things that I'm trying to do right now is actually turn basically, obviously I'm a musician at heart. So what I end up doing right now when I say that I do an Inside Out faith event is it's basically kind of this hybrid version. I play a little bit, narrate the story a little bit with the music that people are familiar with, and then also tell the story of my own journey through as a person of faith and with my sexual orientation is kind of the topic. And then I open that to up to a lot of Q&A, which in church environments it's just huge, kind of like, wow, what do? We actually get to raise questions and ask questions. I've never met a gay person before, kind of thing can happen sometimes. So if that's something that is if in particular, I think I mostly deal with churches that want to have this conversation. There are also advocacy groups, sometimes like PFLAG groups or local LGBT chapters of some nature, that want to be able to figure out how, or have somebody that's willing to step in and talk about this faith-based element. The best way to do it right now is just to stop by the Inside Out Faith Facebook page. You can pretty much get a hold of all the conduits for me, like I said, through jenniferknapp.com. But I'm on Twitter at Inside Out Faith, at Inside Out Faith on Twitter as well. InsideOutFaith.org is the website. And then, of course, there's the booking at Inside Out Faith. If you're actually really serious and want an inquiry, if there's some way that, just having somebody willing to come in and just, hang out and tell their story, I think it's just such a huge thing. I think, at least in my experience in a lot of the faith in churches that I go to right now, there's this real air of, if I start to tell my story, what will happen? And for the people that for those of us who have gone that extra mile and kind of like flipped the light switch on into that really dark space and started to tell our stories, I think the thing that we can discover is how many friends of LGBTs there are out there. And I think the automatic thing that we think about, especially in our current climate today, is the first enemy of any LGBT conversation is the church. And it's, whether you're talking about gay marriage, any kind of gay rights issue, it's like, Adam and Eve, that kind of cliche of Adam and Eve and Adam and Steve's clearly died out, but it is one of the first and immediate combatants. And to give like a little bit of reference to that, I think it was GLAAD last year, in conjunction with the University of Missouri, if I get that right, did an article talking about the missing voices of faith. And what they found in their research was, in terms of like the public consensus of what's happening in America, 3 out of 4 anti-gay voices that we see and hear in the media actually come from religious-based environments. Yet what we're showing in the trends in faith-based communities, that well over 50% of people that are actually sitting in the pews don't have a problem with LGBTs and are actually acting in a lot more affirming and open ways. And I would tell you that that's happening for me as well, like not only in my inbox and the personal kind of experiences I have as a gay person of faith, but also when I go out and hang out with churches, most people are like, I don't even realize this is a big issue. But we do realize that it's a big issue because the people that are actually speaking anti usually do so on behalf of God, yet the numbers really aren't supporting. So there are a lot of people of faith basically that aren't really speaking up and saying, listen, I love you just the way that you are. So that's kind of the premise of Inside Out Faith. And the people who call me are usually churches that are inside of their community saying, listen, we've got the rainbow flag over the door. We don't know what else to do. I don't have a microphone, but I'm yelling as loud as I can. Churches are showing up all the time and marching in gay pride parades all across this country. Groups and organizations like PFLAG, Human Rights, the Human Rights Campaign to GLAAD are all starting to embrace the spiritual element of what so many people go through. Just because you come with an alternative view or like less than normal, or not normal's not the right word, like non-heteronormative kind of standard traditional whatever people think that we're putting in sexual orientation and gender identity a box. Our spirituality doesn't fly out the window. It's still intact. I mean, I meet Southern Baptist kids all the time that are coming out every single day, and they want to be Southern Baptists. And as hard as that is for me to get my head around, that's the way that's their faith language, to be able to express in that tradition of Southern Baptists. Or for Catholics in Dignity USA, to Catholics, if you grow up and Catholic is your form of spiritual expression, to be able to have honor in that. It doesn't stop in identifying in how you identify with your gender. In fact, it's part of the whole part of your story. And I think that's the trend that's changing. And there are more and more environments, and anywhere from Mormons to Catholics to Baptists to Episcopals. I mean, I can't think of a denomination or a flavor of Christianity today that I've run across that doesn't have some contingency saying, listen, the door is open to start realizing that this is a full part of our faith experience, and sexual orientation and gender identity included. So, for whatever accident that I came to be kind of a part of this, I'm really grateful. I mean, whatever cost, and it can be costly at times. I mean, there's no question about it. I mean, I've certainly had my share of hate mail in reference to, burn in hell kind of comments and I'm, an abomination and a disappointment to God. Those are the things that I expected when I decided to come out. If I wasn't ready and prepared to be at that point, I don't think I would be doing music today. But when I did that, and I kind of was willing to flip the light on that room, I was shocked and amazed at how much affirmation and positive experience has been there. And there is negativity, but I mean, you can't please anybody, you can't please everybody all the time. But I think the myth, sometimes that fear gets us when any kind of fear, no matter, fear of standing up on a stage and singing a song, to fear of creating and letting somebody see your poetry, your painting, or revealing some part of yourself to anybody else. It's the fears that keep us from sharing that, and it keeps us also away from the blessings that we can get when we decide to reveal some of that. So that's the amazing part and joy about life. And I think to not to get long-winded, but I think the part about that I've learned about in the process of sharing both my sexual orientation in this context and the way that faith is kind of, and my art and all of this stuff has kind of come together at one point, it's made me realize that just life is amazing and precious, and whatever gift that I have to contribute there's no part of me or no part of fear or negativity in my life that I want to limit me from experiencing my life. And sexual orientation, where I fit on that spectrum, has very little to do with the conversation. That's not what I've learned out of this whole process. Like, wow, who do I want to be as a human being? And am I going to not do music because I'm afraid of something? No, I'm going to do something that I was made to do because I was made to do it, and it just courses through my veins. I'm going to breathe my next breath. And I think that's kind of the fun part of IOF, Inside Out Faith. The further we get down that track, the less we're having any kind of theological debate about sexual orientation or gender identity. We're simply meeting people all the time, telling about how their faith has actually affirmed them and helped them get through this process.
Well, I think this is a good point. I actually have a guest with us in studio, and a graduate student here at Wright State University studying portrayals of transgender people in film and how those films impact society. And so I'd like to invite into a little roundtable discussion with us a gentleman named HR as our resident expert on LGBT issues. Welcome to the program, HR.
Thanks.
So one of the things...
You're so long-winded.
He's a man of many words. So one of the things that I kind of wanted to pose, just as a question for all of us to kind of think about and to respond to, is to what degree is claiming a sexual orientation label useful and empowering for someone outside of a normative, a heteronormative experience? And to what degree does it maybe minimize or even simplify the complex experience of being human.
I guess from my research and experience, I'm very anti-labels anyway. I just don't like it. I don't see, in my perspective, that they fit a whole lot of purpose except for putting you in a box. But, I mean, I guess if you want to be in that box for, possible support or whatever, then that could be a good thing. But then it also, you can make yourself a target by claiming that label as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny thing about a label. I've wrestled with that a lot too. In particular, like for me, when I had to make that decision, what do I? I mean, I'd been with my partner for 5 years before somebody called me a lesbian. It never occurred to me. I was like, what? What does that mean? I don't know. I don't know how to be a lesbian. I didn't know what to do with my hands all of a sudden. It's like walking across the stage and not being aware of the way that you walk. It was just very bizarre. But I mean, yet at the same time, labels can, I've seen a lot of people who choose labels and they're very empowering. And I think the best thing I can say about them at this point is that, in the things that we do adopt, I think there's a real appreciation, I think, sometimes where we have to say, the disciplines and the boundaries that we draw for ourselves and the way that we imagine ourselves are really important qualities. At the same time, you have to kind of give those edges a little bit of fluidity because we do change. I mean, anywhere from like I grew up with the shame of country music, right? And now I'm going back to it. I didn't want that to be there. I didn't want anyone to say that I liked country music. And it's a frivolous thing. It means nothing about me. Don't call me a country music fan. Now today I'm like, crank up Johnny Cash, give me a little Dolly Parton, and I'm not ashamed of it at all. And I realize that's a really small thing in terms of when we're talking about gender identity and sexual orientation. But I think for some people I've really met that label is very important to them in their process, and you start trying to chip away at that, and it becomes really problematic. And I feel like I've experienced both kind of ironies, like the times where I've not wanted to be labeled a Christian, I've not wanted to be labeled a lesbian. I mean, every once in a while I still hear lesbian. It just seems so weird to me. It's not what I think about. I don't get up every day and put on my lesbian pants and my lesbian boots and brush my teeth with my lesbian toothbrush. It's just very bizarre. But at the same time, can I share an anecdote? I know I'm always so long-winded, but yeah. I was at Lynchburg College on National Coming Out Day last year. And, of course, opposite of Lynchburg College is with Liberty University. And there were students showing up at this event. It was a faith-based LGBT event at Lynchburg College. And there were students showing up there from Liberty University that were that knew that they could possibly get penalized on their campus for attending this event. And obviously weren't out, couldn't kind of deal publicly in any way with their sexual orientation or gender identity. And we're even coming up saying, listen, I don't even know how long I'll be able to stay here if I see somebody here that could they were just really worried about that. And all of a sudden at no point in time, I'd always kind of referred to myself as a person of faith in public. And I still do. I think, Christian's important to me, but I'm not willing to die on that hill. And that day I was just like, this is crazy. If you're a gay Christian and you want to claim your faith and that tradition is really important to you, it's important to be able to name it and to have confidence in name it. So I marched right over the Liberty campus, stood right there and said, I'm gay and I'm Christian. And, just with the Liberty University thing in the background. And that really mattered to me on that day. I really learned a lot. And I think because I could do that day. And I'd met a couple of people that day who wanted to be able to reclaim that label for themselves, that tradition or something about that really mattered to them. So there are two sides of it. But I also feel like the real heavy pressure that, I don't want to be put in a box either. So, how do you talk about that? Mm-hmm. And how do you still give value to the names that we need to call them to help us get through it? I don't know.
Well, and then there's also the invention of the new labels. Like some people that they don't want to go by, lesbian or gay, and then they just use queer.
Right. Which I found as a writer from times I did a HuffPost piece and I wrote queer, just trying to put everybody into that blog. And because for me, I didn't mean anything by it. And then I had some people really fighting that label. So it is kind of one of those things where I meant it to be polite. And I think as you read through the article, you could feel that it was trying to be multiply inclusive of a wide range of folks. And at the same time, people will still fight that. So, it's kind of the weird thing. We're in a fun time, I think, where we actually get, I take it as a positive sign that I don't have to be labeled by that, and I can push a little bit in my own identity and kind of explain that a little bit. And there's an environment that will allow me to explain that, as opposed to even 20 years before. Gay, lesbian, whatever. It was just hard enough to even say out loud. And I think now we have the luxury of being, I do think it's a luxury to be able to say, listen, we now have a platform to be able to talk about this, as limited as sometimes it might feel, to be able to take that with a great deal of respect and honor for the people that have gone before us and the labels that they've had to kind of break, reshape, and even put there in a way that we might feel that we have to fight today is really important for us to realize that we now have a voice, I think, with a lot more consistency than we might have had in the past.
Okay, I had never really actually thought myself about sexual orientation labels really until I went through the ordination process, and I happened to be a woman who was single in my mid-30s, who was an alpha male, who consistently listens to lesbians with guitars. This is like all I ever listened to. This is like strike one, strike two, strike three. So every time I would get into a conversation with people, they would kind of start fishing, for me to kind of unveil. And I had never really thought about, what it was like to have strangers kind of clawing and gnawing. And I happened to be straight, but it was just the weirdest thing to have people asking me about that. And so I kind of got to thinking about that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but so you've had an experience that's kind of made you see the labels that you didn't perhaps maybe even realize that you had yourself, the labels that other people would have put on you by simply you just walking into the room.
Yeah. I mean, for me, most people who are straight, it's kind of a default label. You don't really ever have to think about it. And when I had to think about it, it was like, well, that's the right label for me. But it makes sense. You now know the gender of everyone that I've ever dated and who presumably who I would anticipate dating in the future.
Because that's something you really want to talk about at length.
Right. But what you don't know is the depth and the richness and the complexity that I could still love another woman or that's something that the label kind of takes that story and minimizes it. Like, essentially, like I said, what churches know about me is who I'm likely to date. But for me, when people were pushing and pushing and pushing for that label, it's like, yeah, this is the right one if this is a real sensitivity for you. But for me, it kind of, debased isn't the right word, but it minimized the possibility of human relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as an artist, as a songwriter, minimizing somebody's experience is hardly I want to expand that experience and have that even take a minor experiences and make a novel out of that one moment in time. So I think I personally really appreciate that sense of struggle at a space where well, yes, I do like women, so I guess it's accurate for you to call me a lesbian, but then that instant thing that you have after that where you do, in some sense, feel minimized or limited, and, what do you do and how much time and attention do you give to that, But most of us don't, but I think you're really interesting because, Marcy, because you're saying that you've had an experience that's all of a sudden made you realize those edges and those limits where you might not have realized that. And I mean, I think even as an having lived internationally, I wouldn't have thought, hey, I'm an American. But every day, sometimes when I would get an Australian, I would always be reminded that I was a Yankee. I was like, oh, please. Every time I opened my mouth, somebody would say something about George Bush. And I'm like, oh, seriously? I just want to order a pizza, and so it made me understand that yes, the things that what am I going to do about that when somebody points out that particular thing that may be a little bit true or even not even remotely true. Then you have the opportunity to then expand your patience and you get to expand that boundary maybe for them a little bit or that understanding of where that label is. And I think that becomes a really important factor as well.
What is one thing that you in your studies or you, Jennifer, and kind of being part of the LGBT community, wish that the religious community knew about LGBT people?
That's I don't know if you've got anything to immediately put into that space.
The only thing that I've had an experience with, I have, a couple of friends who are transgender or intersexed and had a really hard time getting, local churches to accept them, but then they actually used a couple of passages about the eunuchs. Especially there's one where it's actually quotes from Jesus where he's saying people who were born, so it wasn't the punishment of a eunuch. Right. So that could actually fit in with intersexed. And if you actually reread some of that and you actually think about the context in which it was written, instead of what you've been pumped to think now, because of all the other translations or the other
Yeah.
perspectives on it, not everything means exactly what you think it means.
Well, I do think we have a history of disservice in our faith traditions of one, not looking at how we've actually historically evolved in kind of relating human sexuality in our faith communities. But I think one of the biggest disservices that I think most people don't realize is that, and for a lot of people, and I will say this, for a lot of people who go through any kind of LGBT kind of sexual orientation, gender identity issue from a family that has a long history of living in a religious environment, is that it's long been labeled as this thing as an identification of something spiritually going wrong with you. And the irony of it is most everybody I've ever talked to, the first thing they do is look to God, like, oh God, please don't let me be gay, or oh God, please let this not be the case, or oh God, what's going on? I mean, it's a really intensely, deeply personal experience. And for those people who do connect in that way through a particular religious tradition or some kind of faith-based tradition, or Christians, they don't it's not an immediate turning away to God. It's often an instantaneous turning to. They're turning to community. They're turning to the places that help us spiritually understand this deeply intimate, personally psychological, deeply spiritual process of who we are as individuals. And then when our when we come into contact with other people who understand that language and that sense of community, I think that's the part that faith communities often don't realize is that's where a lot of LGBTs do expect to turn. And when they do, what a tragedy it is when the first reaction is to turn that away, because it's an act of intimacy to be able to share with you some part of our story that even we may not even fully understand yet. And I mean, it's just beyond me that something just so personal would be treated so cavalierly without taking the time and patience, and assume that something's wrong with somebody spiritually, when in fact I think to me that's the evidence that somebody is saying that they're trying to spiritually take very seriously this process inside of their faith community.
Mm-hmm. We have time maybe for one more question, and then I'm going to ask, I'm going to kind of give you a chance to wrap up any thoughts you have. But the last question I have is, for a lot of college kids, being in this environment, maybe the first, and young adults too, maybe the first time that they have the bloom of self-awareness, that they have some questions
Sure.
about their own sexual orientation, and that maybe the first time that they even have access to resources, or that they have just a means really to go through a process and ask questions. So what advice do you have for a young adult or for a college student who is experiencing, these blooms of self-awareness?
I mean, definitely, especially around here on Wright State, like Wright State itself has a really good, they have the Safe Space program, and they also have professors who are trained. They have little magnets up on their doors that show that they're
great.
trained. We have a resource room where, there's people who are trained in there as well. You can go in, you can talk to them. It's a really good environment. Don't be afraid to talk to people. The counselors on Wright State campus are really good. I mean, don't be afraid to talk to people, because it is very, very welcoming. There are GLBT organizations on campus, and get involved in the community. I mean, in the Dayton area, I know all over Ohio, and at least certain places. I know back in my hometown, there's like nothing, but Dayton area, Cincinnati, Columbus, there's all sorts of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know right away where something is, just kind of listen. Somebody will tell you where it is.
Yeah, my push has always been education. I mean, we can do a lot now without having to necessarily be so incredibly public about it. I mean, you can check out a book from the library without ever having anyone seen what you've checked out. You can do it, digitally now. You can buy a book. You can Google anything. And I think the encouragement that I have for most folks is anytime we're really scared, about the next move, I don't know about everybody, but for me, one of the first things I do is just go into lockdown mode and think that nobody will understand. And it's just absolutely preposterous. There are an amazing amount of resources out there. At the same time, some of them are terrible and some are really, really great. And it's kind of that combination. You can sit at home for a while and get away with Googling your way through this,
Right.
but at some point you're going to have to connect with other people and find out what of those resources are actually really helpful, across the board. And even for me, when I was coming back to America and knowing that I was going to have to be very public about this, it was weird. I'm like watching every like LGBT thing I can get my hands on Netflix and documentaries. Like I had no idea what it was like to be gay, even though I'd been in a same-sex relationship for years. So there's a lot culturally going on. But the second thing I'd say is it's not just about LGBT people moving. I mean, I've got a lot of straight friends that are just safe people, and you know that you're a safe person, or if you've had an experience that you can share, your involvement really matters inside of our community. I think one of the historic stigmas is that, I don't want to just go to a gay church, or I don't just want to go to a gay group. It's not just about gays and LGBTs or just, trans or intersex people just getting together of their kind in a group. It takes a community to kind of really break the shackles of the social stigmas, knowing that we've got work and building resources in those kinds of communities. And I think there are ways, if you're what we like to refer to in the LGBT community as allies, if you're an ally, to be able to stand up in whether it's in your church or local community, or being able to help kind of organize, a pride event in your local surrounds, I think is really important too, to be able to step up, because there are a lot of people that need you to just kind of bridge the gap, because at the end of the day, we're all like trying to figure out how to love one another and get along, and I just want to be loved kind of thing. So
very good. Well, Jennifer, we have been so thrilled to have you on the program. Do you have any final thoughts for us?
Yeah, no, just thank you so much for having me here. And if you're somewhere and wanting to go hang out at a show tomorrow night, meet me in Columbus at
the Rumba Club. This has been Ordinary Heroes with Jennifer Knapp. To learn more about Jennifer Knapp, check out her website at www.jenniferknapp.com. And we'll leave you today with a track off her most recent album, Letting Go.